the winter of 1879, contractors renovating the Sunset Years Christian home in Hartford, Connecticut, stumbled upon a chilling discovery. Hidden beneath the floorboards of the medical wing were 23 leather-bound ledgers detailing systematic murders over 34 years. Dr. William Porter, his wife Margaret, and her sister Sarah had orchestrated the deaths of 189 elderly residents, stealing over $3 million in inheritances. The ledgers outlined each murder, revealing a disturbing level of premeditation and greed. Authorities suppressed the information for nearly a century, fearing it would destroy the public's trust in Christian charity. The Porters had established the home in 1845, presenting themselves as devoted caretakers. Dr. Porter, a Yale-trained physician and Mexican War veteran, and his wife, a trained nurse, had created a refuge for Hartford's aging elite. The Sunset Years Christian home promised peace and comfort for elderly residents with daily prayers, Bible study, and medical care. However, their true intentions were far darker. From the very beginning, they had devised a plan to exploit and murder wealthy, isolated individuals, systematically siphoning off their estates. The first sign of trouble occurred in 1847, when 73-year-old widow Mrs. Abigail Thornton arrived at the home. She had a fortune of $50,000 and had chosen the home for its reputation. After just 3 weeks, she exhibited troubling symptoms, which Dr. Porter attributed to mental decline. Margaret administered a fatal dose of morphine, and within days, Mrs. Thornton was dead. The Porters then presented a forged will claiming the woman had left her estate to the home, and Hartford authorities accepted it without question. Please give me a like and subscribe so I can be motivated to create more great videos. What seemed like a tragedy in the eyes of the community was actually a well-executed plan to steal Mrs. Thornton's fortune. The Porters had methodically drugged her with morphine, creating the appearance of a natural death. They had even forged her will by practicing her handwriting and ensuring that her distant daughter wouldn't contest it. Over the next 32 years, the Porters repeated this crime using the same method on 188 other residents, all while maintaining the facade of Christian charity. The ledgers uncovered in 1879 documented their grim success. Every death was meticulously planned with morphine overdoses used to simulate natural decline. The stolen inheritances funded the expansion of the home, and the Porters justified their actions as divine work. For them, murder was not a crime but a profitable mission endorsed by God. In the months after Mrs. Thornton's death, the atmosphere at Sunset Years Christian home shifted subtly. Dr. Porter became increasingly selective about accepting new residents, claiming it was to ensure proper care, but actually seeking those who were wealthy, isolated, and vulnerable to manipulation. Margaret, using her nursing expertise, carefully evaluated potential residents, considering their mental state, family dynamics, and financial assets. Sarah Porter focused on legal matters, forging documents with knowledge gleaned from local lawyers. Meanwhile, Dr. Porter refined their methods of murder, experimenting with drugs like morphine, arsenic, and laudanum to simulate natural decline. Throughout the late 1840s and early 1850s, the Porters used their stolen wealth to enhance the facility, hosting charity events to reinforce their image as devout Christian caretakers. These events also helped identify potential victims and build a network of influential supporters, including Reverend Whitmore, who regularly praised their work. As the Porters' confidence grew, they began to rate their murders based on how much money was stolen, the elegance of the murder methods, and their performance as grieving caretakers. In 1849, Dr. Porter's ledger described the slow poisoning of Colonel James Hartford, rating the execution as exemplary, and noting that the inheritance of $73,500 had been secured. By 1850, the Sunset Years Christian home was highly respected in Hartford, with the Porters embedded in the local elite. However, the increasing number of deaths at the home began attracting suspicion. Dr. Samuel Harrison, the city's coroner, noticed an unusually high number of death certificates signed by Dr. Porter. His concerns were further raised when Father Patrick O'Brien, a local Catholic priest, mentioned that several families had found their relatives had converted to Protestantism just before their deaths and altered their wills accordingly. This hinted that the Porters might be targeting Catholic residents using conversion as a cover for changing their wills. Dr. Harrison's investigation faced resistance due to the Porters' influential status. They learned of his suspicions and took measures to conceal their actions, spreading out the deaths and varying their methods. They even cultivated Dr. Harrison, inviting him to tour the facility and presenting their work as the result of accepting difficult cases that other institutions wouldn't. By 1851, they had successfully neutralized any threat from the investigation, solidifying their control over the Sunset Years Christian home. Harrison's concerns were quickly dismissed by Hartford city officials who valued the Sunset Years Christian home's contributions over the coroner's suspicions. The Porters had survived their first significant threat, but the experience made them aware of the risks they faced. They began refining their methods of concealment, including fabricating medical records and forming connections with corrupt officials who would protect them from future scrutiny. What they didn't anticipate was that their meticulous record-keeping would eventually expose them. The hidden ledgers containing damning evidence of every murder they committed remained secure for now, and the Porters continued their lethal operations with newfound confidence. As the years passed, the Porters' darkest crimes remained hidden under the guise of Christian charity. In 1853, however, a new challenge emerged that tested their system. Mrs. Eleanor Whitfield, a 71-year-old widow with a $200,000 estate, became their latest target. She was an ideal victim, wealthy, isolated, and suffering from early dementia. The Porters quickly set to work assessing her finances, documenting fake symptoms, and researching legal requirements for claiming her inheritance. Things seemed to go as planned until they discovered that Mrs. Whitfield had developed a peculiar habit of writing letters to herself to cope with her memory loss. These letters documented her observations, and in one entry, she mentioned feeling strange after taking Dr. Porter's medicine and suspected a connection between the recent deaths of other residents and the medicine she had been given. The Porters, realizing that Mrs. Whitfield was more aware than they had anticipated, decided to accelerate her timeline. However, increasing her morphine dosage too quickly caused her to become violently ill with symptoms that clearly indicated poisoning. Other residents began to notice her sudden decline, and some staff members started asking questions. Margaret Porter struggled to explain her condition, claiming she had a rare form of dementia. The situation worsened when Mrs. Whitfield's original physician, Dr. Marcus Fleming, paid an unannounced visit to check on her. Upon examining her, he recognized signs of drug poisoning rather than natural dementia. Concerned, he questioned Dr. Porter, who claimed that Mrs. Whitfield's condition had rapidly worsened and required aggressive treatment. Dr. Fleming, unconvinced, insisted on reviewing her medical records, creating a new crisis for the Porters. The records Margaret created to justify Mrs. Whitfield's treatment were full of inconsistencies and fabrications, which Dr. Fleming quickly noticed during a confrontation with Dr. Porter. In Dr. Porter's office with Margaret and Sarah as witnesses, Dr. Fleming meticulously challenged every aspect of Mrs. Whitfield's care. He pointed out contradictions in the medical records and questioned the excessive doses of morphine. When he asked why her family hadn't been informed of her condition, Dr. Porter reacted with indignation, claiming that Dr. Fleming was using outdated knowledge and that the treatments were cutting-edge in geriatric care. He argued that Mrs. Whitfield had entrusted her care to him and that it was his moral and legal responsibility to make treatment decisions. The argument lasted over an hour, with both doctors citing medical texts to support their views. Dr. Fleming insisted that Mrs. Whitfield's symptoms didn't align with natural disease progression, while Dr. Porter argued that her condition was complicated by rapid dementia and organ failure. Finally, Dr. Porter presented a religious argument, claiming Mrs. Whitfield had expressed a desire to die peacefully, with the morphine being administered as palliative care to ease her transition. This explanation aligned with the Christian mission of the home and made it difficult for Dr. Fleming to press further without seeming cold-hearted. Reluctantly, Dr. Fleming accepted Dr. Porter's explanation, but insisted on visiting Mrs. Whitfield twice weekly, scrutinizing her condition. This posed a significant challenge to the Porters, who had to adjust their plans. Unable to carry out their original plan to murder her immediately, they reduced her morphine dosage to allow her to recover slightly while they searched for a way to neutralize Dr. Fleming. Sarah proposed a drastic solution, arranging for an accident to incapacitate Dr. Fleming. She had researched his daily routine and suggested they could cause him to be struck by falling debris on his route to work. However, Dr. Porter rejected this plan, reasoning that the death of a prominent physician would attract too much attention. Instead, he devised a more subtle plan. The Porters decided to allow Mrs. Whitfield to recover enough to satisfy Dr. Fleming's concerns, then discredit his medical judgment. They gradually reduced her morphine dosage while introducing a new drug to mimic heart disease. When Dr. Fleming visited next, he found Mrs. Whitfield in better condition, but now exhibiting signs of cardiac irregularities. Dr. Porter explained that he had adjusted her medications according to Dr. Fleming's recommendations and had already started treatment with Digitalis, a common heart medication. Dr. Fleming was convinced that his initial concerns were unwarranted and praised Dr. Porter for his responsive care. He agreed to reduce his visits to once a week, which gave the Porters more freedom to operate. What Dr. Fleming didn't know was that the Porters were artificially inducing heart failure with the Digitalis. 6 weeks later, Mrs. Whitfield died of apparent heart failure, with Dr. Fleming present to witness her peaceful passing. He signed the death certificate without question, believing her death was consistent with the cardiac symptoms he had observed. The Porters had successfully eliminated their most challenging victim while keeping up the appearance of excellent care. Mrs. Whitfield's death, despite Dr. Fleming's scrutiny, bolstered the Porters' confidence in their ability to manipulate both their victims and the medical community. By 1865, after 20 years of operating their murderous enterprise, the Porters had grown bolder and more careless, emboldened by their success. The end of the Civil War brought a fresh crop of vulnerable elderly residents, particularly Union veterans, who had earned respect and pensions, but were now weakened by war injuries. The Porters saw these men as prime targets, and one of their most significant opportunities came with Captain Ezra Blackwood, a 62-year-old war veteran who had lost his left arm at Gettysburg. With his substantial pension and savings and no living family, Blackwood was an ideal candidate. However, Blackwood proved to be different from the Porters' previous victims. His military background made him naturally suspicious of authority. He was quick to notice patterns at the Sunset Years Christian home that troubled him. He observed that several residents had experienced rapid declines in health shortly after their arrival, and he found it unsettling that Dr. Porter often discussed financial matters with the residents. He also noted that the home's mortality rate was unusually high. Captain Blackwood began conducting his own investigation, documenting his observations, and questioning residents about their experiences. Things became more complicated when Blackwood started experiencing symptoms he suspected were caused by the medications Dr. Porter had prescribed for his chronic pain. He noticed that laudanum made him confused and disoriented, and he began hiding his medications. Without the drugs to incapacitate him, he remained alert and increasingly suspicious, which thwarted the Porter's usual methods of control. Dr. Porter tried to convince him to take the medications, but Blackwood refused, insisting he felt better without them. Blackwood's suspicions began to spread. He shared his concerns with a select few residents, building a network of allies who helped him investigate further. The Porters, realizing they were facing a serious threat, moved swiftly to contain the situation. Margaret discovered the extent of the captain's investigation when she intercepted a letter he had written to his former commanding officer, detailing his suspicions and requesting assistance in investigating the home's activities. The letter was a devastating blow. If it reached the authorities, it could unravel the Porter's carefully constructed operation. Dr. Porter understood that Blackwood's knowledge and the evidence he was collecting posed a significant threat. The captain's military background and alertness made poisoning impractical, and his sudden death would attract the attention of Army investigators. The Porters had to act fast and devised a new plan. They would stage an accident, making Blackwood's death appear as if it resulted from his war injuries. Sarah Porter proposed that they push the captain down the home's main staircase, claiming that his missing arm had caused him to lose his balance. The fall would be explained as a tragic accident related to his disability, diverting suspicion away from the Porters. The plan would require careful coordination and precise timing to ensure that Blackwood's death would look natural. The Porters waited for a stormy night when the staff would be distracted to carry out their final plan against Captain Blackwood. Dr. Porter, armed with a syringe containing a powerful sedative, approached Blackwood's room intending to incapacitate him before staging a fall. But Blackwood was ready. As Dr. Porter entered the room, Blackwood, using his military training, was waiting behind the door with a walking stick raised as a weapon. The two men struggled briefly, and Blackwood, with his combat instincts, overpowered Dr. Porter, forcing him to drop the syringe and flee. The failed attack confirmed Blackwood's suspicions about the Porter's intentions. He realized his life was in immediate danger and needed to escape. However, Blackwood also understood that fleeing wouldn't stop the Porters from continuing their deadly operations. Determined to expose their crimes, he chose to stay and gather irrefutable evidence that would stop them for good. Using his military skills to remain undetected, Blackwood began searching the home for proof of the Porters' illegal activities. In Dr. Porter's office, he uncovered vials of morphine, arsenic, and other poisons that had no legitimate medical purpose. He also found forged documents, including blank wills and death certificates, which the Porters used to steal residents' inheritances. Most damning, however, was a partial list of deceased residents, along with notes about the amounts inherited by the facility. Blackwood meticulously documented the evidence, planning to present it to military authorities who could investigate the matter thoroughly. As he was photographing the incriminating documents, Sarah Porter discovered him in the office. The confrontation that followed was unlike anything the Porters had faced before. Blackwood didn't attempt to hide his actions. Instead, he calmly informed Sarah that he had already sent copies of the evidence to military authorities. His death, he explained, would only confirm their worst suspicions. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Sarah understood that the Porters were no longer dealing with helpless victims, but with a trained investigator who had systematically documented their crimes. The situation escalated further when Dr. Porter returned to his office and saw the confrontation. The captain's calmness and preparation made Dr. Porter realize that their situation was far more serious than he had anticipated. The evidence was comprehensive enough to destroy them, and Blackwood's claim of having contacted the authorities couldn't be dismissed as a bluff. Desperate, Dr. Porter made a drastic decision. Instead of negotiating or fleeing, he chose to eliminate the threat entirely. In a moment of reckless desperation, Dr. Porter retrieved a pistol from his desk and shot Captain Blackwood 3 times in the chest, killing him instantly. The gunshots rang out through the home, sending residents and staff into chaos. The Porters, having committed murder for over 2 decades, were now faced with the irreversible consequences of their actions. Margaret Porter arrived at the scene within minutes, followed by several terrified residents who demanded an explanation. Dr. Porter tried to claim that Captain Blackwood had attacked him and that the shooting had been in self-defense. However, the evidence contradicted his story. The presence of the incriminating documents, Blackwood's camera, and his detailed notes made it clear that the shooting was nothing less than murder. The captain's body showed no signs of an attack, and the gunshot wounds were consistent with execution-style killing fired at close range. The Porters had committed a crime that could no longer be covered up. The murder marked the beginning of the end for the Porters' criminal empire. The gunshots had been heard by neighbors, and within hours, Hartford police arrived at the home to investigate the reports of violence. The Porters attempted to maintain their facade, claiming the shooting was a tragic accident involving a disturbed veteran suffering from war-related mental illness. However, the police investigation quickly uncovered inconsistencies in their story. Blackwood's evidence found in Dr. Porter's office, along with the forged documents, exposed the systematic murder operation they had maintained for years. The discovery of Blackwood's notes set in motion the most extensive criminal investigation Hartford had ever seen. Police searched the entire facility, finding hidden caches of poison, forged documents, and financial records that detailed the theft of hundreds of thousands of dollars from murdered residents. The investigation also revealed the hidden ledgers where Dr. Porter had meticulously recorded every murder. As the investigation unfolded, families of deceased residents came forward with questions about their loved ones who had died under suspicious circumstances at the Sunset Years Christian home. The pattern matched Blackwood's findings. Dozens of elderly, wealthy individuals had died unexpectedly, and their inheritances had been stolen through forged wills. The Porters were arrested on multiple charges of murder and fraud, marking the end of one of the most successful criminal enterprises in American history. Yet even as they faced prosecution, the Porters continued to claim their innocence, maintaining that they had been devoted Christian caretakers, falsely accused by a disturbed military veteran with delusions. The horror in Hartford only intensified as the trial of Dr. William Porter, Margaret Porter, and Sarah Porter began on October 15, 1879. Dubbed the most sensational criminal trial in Connecticut's history, the courtroom was packed with spectators, journalists, and families of the Porters' victims, creating a charged atmosphere that threatened to boil over. Prosecutor James Mitchell had spent months preparing his case using Captain Blackwood's evidence as the cornerstone. The charges included 189 counts of first-degree murder, multiple counts of fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. The prosecution's case relied on three key pieces of evidence that would ultimately bring the Porters' reign of terror to an end. The evidence against the Porters was damning, and the trial quickly became a spectacle in Hartford. The hidden ledgers, which documented each murder in meticulous detail, proved to be the most damaging evidence. Dr. Porter's detailed record-keeping had inadvertently created an exhaustive confession. Each entry documented the method of death, the financial motivations, and the systematic nature of the crimes. For example, one entry read, Mrs. Sarah Caldwell, arsenic administered over 6 weeks. Symptoms consistent with natural decline. Will forged successfully. Inheritance $67,400. Total time investment 8 weeks. Profit per week $8.25. Excellent return on effort. The clinical detachment in these entries shocked even the most seasoned court observers. The Porters had not only murdered their victims, but treated each killing like a business transaction with cost-benefit analyses and performance evaluations. The ledgers showed that they had developed a system for rating their crimes, judging each based on profitability, difficulty, and the effectiveness of their deception. Even more chilling was Dr. Porter's personal observations about the victim's suffering, including comments like, "Subject exhibited amusing confusion during final days." He also praised his wife's ability to perform as a grieving caretaker, noting that Margaret's ability to shed tears on command was a technique that remained an excellent method for deflecting suspicion. The prosecution presented further powerful testimony from Dr. Samuel Harrison, the coroner who had been suspicious of the home's unusually high mortality rate years earlier. Dr. Harrison explained how his investigations had been thwarted by the Porters' political connections and community standing, revealing that their crimes could have been stopped much earlier had authorities been willing to pursue them. Several staff members provided crucial testimony. Nurse Elizabeth Hartwell spoke about Margaret Porter administering excessive doses of medication at odd times. She also overheard the Porters discussing the financial situations of residents and their lack of family connections. Groundskeeper Thomas Murphy testified about strange activities he had witnessed, such as the Porters burying items in the garden late at night. and burning documents that seemed to be legal papers. His testimony helped establish that the Porters had been actively destroying evidence for years. The defense, led by prominent Hartford attorney Charles Whitman, faced an uphill battle. The evidence was overwhelming, and the Porters' own records provided detailed confessions to every crime. Whitman's strategy was to argue that the Porters had been driven insane by their religious fanaticism, and that their crimes were the result of mental illness, not criminal intent. He presented expert testimony from alienists who claimed that the Porters were suffering from religious mania, which distorted their moral judgment. According to this defense, the Porters believed they were doing God's work by ending the suffering of elderly residents and using their inheritances for Christian charity. This defense required the Porters to admit their crimes, leading to dramatic moments in court. Dr. Porter testified that he had killed residents because he believed God had called him to end their suffering and use their wealth for righteous purposes. His calm and rational explanation, devoid of remorse, sent a chilling message to the court. Margaret Porter's testimony was even more disturbing. Margaret Porter's testimony was chilling. She described the murders as acts of mercy, claiming that she had felt divinely inspired when administering the fatal doses of poison. She testified that she prayed over each victim as they died, asking God to forgive their sins and welcome them into eternal rest. Her complete lack of remorse or recognition of her crimes stunned even the defense attorneys. Sarah Porter's testimony revealed the cold, calculating nature of their operation. She admitted to forging wills and stealing inheritances, but justified her actions by claiming she was following God's will, redirecting wealth from selfish individuals to charitable purposes. She detailed how she had researched the financial situations and family relationships of their victims, framing these actions as part of her divine mission to identify suitable candidates for merciful release. The prosecution's cross-examination exposed significant flaws in the insanity defense. Prosecutor James Mitchell showed that the Porters' actions were carefully planned and executed with full awareness of their criminal nature. He highlighted their efforts to avoid detection, their destruction of evidence, and their attempts to manipulate investigations as evidence that they knew their actions were illegal. The most damning evidence came from the ledgers themselves. The meticulous financial calculations and performance evaluations proved that the Porters had been motivated by greed rather than religious delusion. The clinical nature of their record-keeping indicated they saw their murders as a business, not acts of divine mercy. Mitchell also presented evidence that the Porters had lived in luxury, using the wealth they had stolen from their victims. They had purchased expensive clothing, jewelry, and furnishings, with their ill-gotten gains contradicting their claims that they had stolen inheritances to fund charitable activities. This evidence underscored their true motivation: personal greed. The trial reached its most dramatic point when Mitchell read aloud from Dr. Porter's final ledger entry, written just days before Captain Blackwood's murder. The entry read, "20 years of successful operations have proven the viability of our method. We have perfected the art of profitable death, combining religious respectability with systematic exploitation. Our victims die believing they are loved, while we acquire the wealth to expand our sacred mission. God has blessed our work with remarkable success, and we are prepared to continue indefinitely. Note: consider expansion to other cities. Hartford market becoming saturated." The courtroom erupted in chaos as the family members of victims shouted accusations and demanded justice. Judge Morrison had to call multiple recesses to restore order and threatened to clear the courtroom if the spectators didn't calm down. The jury deliberated for only 3 hours before returning guilty verdicts for all 3 defendants. The speed of the deliberation reflected the overwhelming evidence against the Porters and the shock the community felt over their horrific crimes. When the verdicts were read, the Porters showed no emotion, maintaining the same cold detachment that had defined their actions throughout the trial. Judge Morrison sentenced each of them to death by hanging, condemning their crimes as the most heinous and calculated murders in the state's history. He expressed that their abuse of the trust placed in them by the Christian community made their actions even more despicable and hoped their execution would serve as a warning to others. In his sentencing statement, Judge Morrison also condemned the Porters' attempt to justify their crimes through religious delusion. "You have blasphemed against the very faith you claim to serve, using the sacred trust placed in you by this Christian community to commit acts of unparalleled evil. Your crimes have not only taken the lives of innocent victims, but have shaken the faith of all who believed in the sanctity of Christian charity." The trial had exposed the complete contradiction between the Porters' public image as trusted caretakers and their private reality as cold, calculating murderers. The revelation of their true motivations shook the community to its core. For 2 decades, the Porters had built a facade of devoted Christian caretakers while running one of the most successful murder operations in American history. Their ability to maintain this deception was not only due to criminal skill, but also their mastery of psychological manipulation. The trial revealed that the Sunset Years Christian home was a meticulously constructed cover for systematic murder and theft. Every aspect of the home, from its religious mission to its charitable activities, was designed to exploit and kill wealthy elderly residents without suspicion. The Porters had cleverly understood that Americans' respect for Christian charity would make them hesitant to investigate accusations against religious institutions. They had exploited the community's faith and trust, creating the perfect environment for their criminal enterprise, showing that even the most sacred institutions could be corrupted by greed and evil. As the defendants were led away to await their execution, investigations continued to uncover the full scope of their crimes. While 189 victims were confirmed, authorities suspected the actual number was even higher. The financial damage was estimated at over $3 million, marking their operation as one of the most profitable criminal enterprises in American history. The trial exposed not only the Porters' individual crimes, but also systemic failures that allowed them to operate with impunity for 20 years. It led to significant reforms in how charitable institutions were monitored and created new legal requirements for investigating suspicious deaths in care facilities. On December 15, 1879, the executions of Dr. William Porter, Margaret Porter, and Sarah Porter took place at Hartford County Jail. Despite the early hour, hundreds gathered outside to witness the final chapter of the Christian home murders. The defendants maintained their composure, with Dr. Porter delivering a final statement that stunned spectators with its complete lack of remorse. "We have served God faithfully," he said from the gallows. "Our work has been misunderstood by those who lack the vision to see divine purpose in earthly suffering. The money we acquired was used for Christian purposes, and the deaths we administered were merciful releases from the pain of earthly existence. History will vindicate our actions when mankind evolves to understand true Christian charity." Margaret Porter's final words were equally chilling. "I have eased the suffering of 189 souls and guided them gently into God's embrace. Each death was an act of love performed with prayer and compassion. I regret only that we were prevented from continuing our sacred mission to help more elderly souls find peace." Sarah Porter remained silent until the last moment. Just before the trapdoor opened, she whispered a prayer that was heard by the attending minister. "Lord, forgive them, for they know not what they do. They have stopped your servants from performing your work, but your will shall be done through others who understand true mercy." The executions were carried out simultaneously at exactly 7 a.m., with all 3 defendants dying quickly and without struggle. The cold detachment with which the Porters faced their fate was a chilling testament to the depth of their moral corruption, and their deaths marked the end of one of the most horrific criminal enterprises in American history. The bodies of the Porters were buried in unmarked graves in Hartford's Potter's Field, as no cemetery would accept them, and no religious denomination would claim them. The city sought to ensure that no monuments to their crimes would be erected, no shrines where the curious or disturbed might come to pay homage to their twisted legacy. The investigation into their crimes continued for months after their execution, with authorities working to identify all their victims and return stolen property to surviving family members. The process was complicated by the porters' sophisticated methods of concealment and the passage of time, as many of the murders had been committed years earlier. Ultimately, investigators confirmed 189 murders and identified an additional 23 suspicious deaths that could not be definitively proven as homicides. The financial investigation revealed that the porters had stolen approximately $3.2 million from their victims, an enormous sum equivalent to tens of millions of dollars today. Most of this money had been spent on expanding and maintaining the Sunset Years Christian home. But significant amounts were also used to buy luxury items for the porters' personal use and make donations to religious organizations throughout Connecticut. The discovery that respected churches had unknowingly accepted donations funded by murder money created a crisis of conscience within Hartford's religious community. Several congregations returned the donations, while others struggled with the ethical dilemma of using tainted money for charitable purposes. The controversy divided the religious community for years, eventually leading to policies requiring detailed documentation for large donations. The Sunset Years Christian home was demolished in the spring of 1880 after city authorities determined that the building had become too infamous to serve any purpose. The property was sold to developers who built modest residences on the site. However, the neighborhood continued to struggle with its association with the murders. Property values remained depressed, and many residents reported feeling uneasy living where so many innocent lives had been taken. The Porter case had far-reaching effects on the regulation of care facilities in the United States. Connecticut passed the first comprehensive laws requiring government oversight of charitable institutions, mandating regular inspections and background checks for care facility operators. Other states followed with similar legislation, establishing a regulatory framework that still governs institutional care today. The case also led to significant changes in inheritance law and probate procedures, with new requirements for witnessing wills, verifying the mental competence of testators, and investigating suspicious bequests to charitable organizations. These reforms made it much more difficult for criminals to forge documents and steal inheritances from vulnerable elderly victims. Perhaps most importantly, the Porter case changed public attitudes toward institutional care for the elderly. Families became more cautious about placing elderly relatives in residential facilities, and communities developed new expectations for transparency and accountability from charitable organizations. The blind trust that had allowed the Porters to operate with impunity for 20 years was replaced by skepticism and a demand for oversight. The psychological impact of the Porter case on Hartford's residents was profound and lasting. Many struggled to reconcile their memories of the Porters as respected community members with the horrific reality of their crimes. Neighbors who had socialized with the family parishioners who had worshipped alongside them, and community leaders who had praised their charitable work, all faced the disturbing realization that they had been completely deceived by master manipulators. Dr. Samuel Harrison, the coroner who had first suspected something was wrong at the home, became a prominent advocate for medical ethics and professional accountability. He spent the remainder of his career developing guidelines for investigating suspicious deaths and training other medical professionals to recognize signs of systematic abuse. His efforts helped ensure that future cases of medical murder would be detected and investigated more swiftly. The staff members who had worked at the Sunset Years Christian home also faced their own struggles with guilt and trauma. Many had unknowingly participated in the scheme or turned a blind eye to the Porters' activities, and the weight of their involvement in such a horrifying operation haunted them long after the trial concluded. Many former employees of the Sunset Years Christian home were devastated to learn that they had unknowingly participated in a murder operation. Having believed they were working for a charitable organization, some were unable to process the horrifying truth and required psychological treatment. Several never returned to healthcare forever, marked by their involvement in the crimes. The families of the Porter's victims experienced a complex mix of emotions following the trial and executions. While some found satisfaction in seeing justice served, many were left grappling with the haunting question of how their elderly relatives had spent their final days and their own failure to recognize the danger their loved ones faced. To help process their grief and anger, support groups for victims' families were formed, marking the beginning of organized victim advocacy efforts in American history. The Porter case also influenced American journalism and true crime literature. The extensive coverage of the trial set new standards for crime reporting, and it became one of the first major criminal cases to be covered by correspondents from multiple cities. Books about the case were published shortly after the executions, beginning a tradition of true crime literature that continues to captivate readers today. Religious leaders used the case to address the dangers of false prophets, emphasizing the importance of distinguishing between genuine Christian charity and exploitation disguised as religious service. The case became a cautionary tale about how evil could hide behind facades of respectability and devotion. The architectural legacy of the case was also notable. The demolition of the Sunset Years Christian home established a precedent for destroying buildings associated with notorious crimes, preventing them from becoming sites of morbid fascination. This practice reflected society's desire to erase physical reminders of extreme evil and avoid glorifying criminal behavior. Modern investigators and historians remain in awe of the sophistication and longevity of the Porter's criminal operation. The combination of medical knowledge, legal expertise, and psychological manipulation they employed was advanced for its time. And even by today's standards, their methodical execution of nearly 200 murders remains one of the most successful criminal enterprises in American history. The case has become a crucial study in criminal psychology, particularly in understanding how seemingly normal individuals can rationalize systematic murder. The Porters' gradual descent into evil, their ability to justify their crimes through religious delusion, and their development of increasingly sophisticated concealment methods provide valuable insights into the criminal mind and the process of moral corruption. The Porter family's crimes serve as a stark reminder of how easily evil can disguise itself behind respectability and religious devotion, and the importance of questioning authority and demanding accountability from those who claim to serve the community. Their story warns us that the most dangerous criminals are often those we trust the most, and that vigilance is necessary for the safety of any society. What do you think of this story? Do you believe everything about the Porter's operation was uncovered? Or might there have been additional crimes that were never discovered? Their meticulous record-keeping suggests that they documented everything, but some of their earliest victims may still remain unidentified. Leave your comment below and share your theories about what other secrets might have died with the Porter family. If you enjoyed this tale and want more stories like this, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share with someone who loves mysteries as dark and twisted as this one. The shadows of the past hold many more secrets, and we'll continue uncovering them together. See you in the next video, where we'll explore another hidden evil that will make you question everything you think you know about human nature. Thank you all very much for watching my video until the end. I sincerely appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.